Humanity had always been underestimated, a species deemed fragile and reckless by the great galactic civilizations. The High Council of Zenith, a union of the most powerful alien races, had observed Earth's wars, its self-destruction, and its relentless pursuit of power with detached amusement. To them, humanity was nothing more than a footnote in the grand history of the cosmos, doomed to fade into irrelevance before ever setting foot beyond its own system. But they had miscalculated. The first mistake was assuming humanity would remain divided. Earth had indeed been a world of chaos, torn apart by centuries of war, ideology, and greed. But when the first alien fleet arrived, not as conquerors but as self-proclaimed overseers, humanity found its unity. The great nations of Earth dissolved overnight. Borders became meaningless. Humanity became one. The united Earth Dominion was born not out of peace, but out of necessity. The second mistake was believing humanity lacked the means to fight. The Zenith Council had assumed their technological superiority would be enough to deter any resistance, but humanity had spent centuries perfecting the art of war, while the other species had stagnated in their long era of peace. Humanity had mastered every form of combat, from planetary invasions to guerrilla warfare. They adapted, they learned, and they reverse-engineered. When the first Zenith warships entered the Sol system expecting a peaceful transition of power, they were met with silence. Then came the response, a fleet of warships powered by stolen and enhanced alien technology. Humanity did not bow. They struck. The first battle was short but brutal. Earth's forces crippled the Zenith's vanguard fleet with a precision and ferocity that stunned the galaxy. The third mistake was thinking humanity could be reasoned with. After the first victory, the Zenith Council sent envoys offering humanity a place within the greater order, but the Dominion had no interest in subjugation. They had seen what the Zenith did to weaker civilizations, stripping them of identity, turning them into servile colonies. Humanity had learned from history, and they refused to be another conquered species. The war that followed reshaped the galaxy. The Zenith Council underestimated humanity at every turn, expecting surrender when they should have prepared for annihilation. Humanity did not fight like the other species. They did not abide by the rules of war. Their soldiers were enhanced, their tactics unpredictable, their resolve unbreakable, and for every world they lost they took 3 in return. It was not long before the Dominion's fleets were no longer just defending Earth, they were expanding. Humanity did not simply want to survive, they wanted to rule. What began as a war of defiance became a campaign of conquest. One by one the member races of the Zenith Council fell before them. The galaxy had never seen a species so relentless, so willing to burn a world just to send a message. The final mistake the Zenith made was believing they still had a chance. They gathered their remaining fleets at the last stronghold, a fortress world that had never fallen in 1,000 years of war. The greatest minds of the Council devised a strategy, using every weapon, every defense, every advantage at their disposal, and then they waited. But humanity did not come with a fleet, they came with an armada. The Dominion had grown in the fires of war, every world conquered, every enemy absorbed into its ranks. The Zenith's greatest fortress became their graveyard. The Dominion's forces shattered their defenses, overwhelmed their armies, and in one final battle crushed the last remnants of resistance. The Zenith Council fell that day, and with it the last hope of those who had once ruled the stars. As the Dominion's flag was raised over the ruins of their stronghold, humanity stood victorious. The final empire had risen, not from diplomacy, not from cooperation, but from fire and blood. The galaxy was theirs now. The Dominion's conquest did not stop with the fall of the Zenith Council. The galaxy had long been ruled by stagnation, the great empires content with their borders, their ancient treaties binding them in a fragile balance. But humanity was different. They did not seek balance, they sought dominion, and they would not stop until the stars themselves bent to their will. The survivors of the old order scattered, some fleeing to the outer reaches of space, others pledging loyalty to their new masters. The Dominion did not tolerate resistance. Those who submitted were given a place in the new order. Those who fought were eradicated. Entire worlds burned as a warning to those who still dreamed of rebellion. But humanity was not just a force of destruction, they were builders as well as conquerors. The Zenith's vast archives of technology were now theirs to exploit, and within a decade the Dominion had surpassed even the most advanced civilizations of the past. They turned dead planets into thriving colonies, shattered moons into shipyards, the resources of the galaxy fueling an empire unlike any before. With each conquered system, the Dominion's forces grew stronger. The once mighty fleets of the alien empires were now nothing more than relics of a bygone era, their weapons, their armor, their ships, all obsolete against the relentless march of human ingenuity. Humanity did not just adopt the technology of the old powers, they refined it, perfected it, turned it into something greater. But even as the Dominion expanded, there were whispers of something beyond the known stars, a darkness that the Zenith had feared, a reason they had remained so stagnant, so cautious. Humanity had unknowingly broken a cycle, a barrier that had kept them hidden from the true predators of the galaxy. The first sign came in the form of silence, entire colonies vanishing without a trace, fleets disappearing without distress signals. The Dominion at first dismissed these losses as mere anomalies, but then the wreckage began to appear, ships torn apart by forces unknown, soldiers found mutilated by weapons that defied understanding. The arrogance of humanity had brought them to the precipice of something far greater than they had ever imagined. The Dominion's Supreme Chancellor Alexander Voss, the man who had led humanity from a fractured world to an empire of 1,000 suns, knew that this was no mere rebellion. No known species possessed such technology, no known force could challenge the Dominion at its peak, yet something had begun to push back, something that did not recognize the Dominion's rule, something that had been watching and waiting. For the first time since their rise, humanity faced an enemy they did not understand, and for the first time in decades fear crept into the heart of the final empire. The Dominion's fleets mobilized, every ship, every soldier, every weapon turned toward the void beyond the known galaxy where the darkness had begun to move. Supreme Chancellor Alexander Voss stood aboard the ISS Imperator, the flagship of the Dominion's Grand Armada, watching as the might of humanity prepared for war. The first real encounter came at the edge of Dominion space on the former Zenith world of Coron Prime. A fleet of Dominion warships sent to investigate the disappearances was met with something beyond comprehension. The enemy was not like any species humanity had fought before. Their ships were not constructed but grown massive living behemoths that twisted and pulsed with unnatural energy. Their weapons did not fire conventional projectiles or energy blasts, but something else, something that consumed metal and flesh alike, reducing ships to nothing but drifting husks in an instant. The battle was over before it truly began. The Dominion's forces were obliterated, their weapons proving useless against an enemy that did not seem to follow the rules of physics. But what terrified the Dominion's leaders more than the loss was what came after. The enemy did not advance, they did not conquer the ruined world of Coron Prime, they simply left as if they had no interest in humanity at all. Voss refused to accept that the Dominion had never known an enemy they could not defeat, and he did not intend to start now. He ordered every mind in the Dominion's vast scientific and military complex to study the wreckage, analyze the data, understand what they were facing, and what they discovered changed everything. The enemy was ancient, older than the Zenith, older than any recorded civilization. The data retrieved from the wreckage suggested they had been present in the galaxy before even the first known empires had risen, a force that had waited in the darkness, unseen, untouchable until now, and humanity, in its relentless expansion, had drawn their attention. The revelation sent a ripple of unease through the Dominion's highest ranks. Some argued for retreat, a consolidation of power, a fortification of known space, but Voss knew better. Humanity had never survived by hiding. They had conquered the galaxy because they were willing to do what others would not, and this would be no different. If this enemy did not recognize the Dominion's rule, then they would be made to acknowledge it by force. The order was given, the full might of the final empire would be unleashed upon the unknown. A war unlike any before was about to begin, not for territory, not for resources, but for survival, and for the first time since their rise humanity did not know if they would win. The Dominion's fleets burned across the void, 100,000 warships armed with the most advanced weapons humanity had ever built. Supreme Chancellor Alexander Voss watched from the bridge of the ISS Imperator as the Armada prepared for the first true engagement against the unknown enemy known only as the Voidborn. Scouts had tracked their movements across the galactic frontier, vast living vessels moving between dead worlds and never settling, never claiming territory. But the Dominion did not wait for war to come to them, they brought war to the enemy. A full-scale assault was launched against a fleet of voidborn ships near the collapsed remains of a neutron star. Humanity's finest soldiers, its greatest tacticians, all prepared to strike with the overwhelming force that had shattered the Zenith and every other empire before it. The first shots were fired. Dominion warships unleashed their devastating weapons, beams of raw energy, torpedoes capable of shattering planets, kinetic rounds moving at a fraction of light speed. The voidborn ships took the hits, and for a moment it seemed as if the battle would go as planned, but then something happened, something no one had expected. The voidborn ships did not evade, they did not shield themselves, instead they absorbed the attacks, their organic hulls shifting, warping, consuming the very energy meant to destroy them, and then they retaliated. The Dominion's forces had never seen weapons like these, tendrils of dark energy lashing out, grasping ships and tearing them apart from the inside out. Hulls cracked, soldiers screamed as their own armor turned against them, systems failed as ships were devoured by forces that defied logic. Entire formations collapsed within minutes as the Voidborn reshaped the battlefield itself, warping space, tearing apart reality. Voss watched in horror as the Dominion's greatest fleet was ripped apart. Their weapons were useless, their strategies meaningless against an enemy that seemed immune to everything they had built. The Imperator itself barely escaped as the remnants of the once mighty armada retreated, beaten for the first time in the history of the final empire. Back on Terra Prime, the news sent shockwaves through the Dominion. For the first time, humanity had encountered an enemy they could not defeat. A panic spread through the outer colonies as rumors grew of void-born incursions, entire worlds vanishing without a trace, entire fleets disappearing into the abyss. Voss knew that if something was not done soon, the fear alone would shatter the Dominion before the void-born even had to strike. But Alexander Voss was not a man who accepted defeat. The Dominion had not conquered the galaxy by surrendering to fear, and so he gathered the greatest minds of the final empire, scientists, strategists, engineers, warlords, and he gave them a single command: find a way to kill the void-born or humanity dies with them. For the first time since its rise, the Dominion stood on the edge of annihilation. The void-born were unlike any enemy humanity had faced before. Their ships were alive, their weapons beyond understanding, their very existence a violation of the laws of reality. Entire fleets had been lost, entire colonies erased without a trace, and yet they did not conquer, they did not communicate, they simply consumed and moved on as if humanity was nothing more than an inconvenience in their path. Alexander Voss refused to accept that humanity had not fought its way to the top just to be swept aside like dust. He ordered every scientist, every engineer, every strategist to focus on one thing: how do we kill the void-born? The answer did not come from the Dominion's military nor from its vast technological archives. It came from something far older, something buried deep within the ruins of the Zenith Council's greatest secrets. The Zenith had known about the void-born for thousands of years. They had not fought them because they had discovered a horrifying truth: the void-born were not invaders, they were something far worse. Records hidden deep within the ancient archives spoke of cycles of extinction, entire civilizations wiped from existence, not by war, not by disease, but by something older than the stars themselves. The void-born were not conquerors, they were cleaners, something that awakened when a civilization reached a certain level of expansion, something that removed anything that could one day threaten the balance of the universe. The Zenith had survived, not by fighting but by remaining small, stagnant, invisible. But humanity had shattered that balance, and now the void-born had come to reset the cycle. Voss read the ancient texts, the desperate warnings of a species that had spent eons avoiding the gaze of the abyss, and he made his decision: humanity would not run, humanity would not hide. If the void-born wanted to erase them from existence, then humanity would do the impossible: they would erase the void-born first. The best minds of the Dominion worked night and day searching for anything that could turn the tide. Every technology, every weapon, every forbidden experiment was considered, and then they found it buried deep within the Zenith archives, a weapon that had never been used, a weapon that had never needed to exist until now. The Zenith called it the Annihilation Core, a theoretical device capable of collapsing space itself, a weapon so powerful it did not just destroy matter, it removed it from existence entirely. It was incomplete, abandoned out of fear of its potential, but Voss did not fear power, he embraced it. Every resource of the Dominion was thrown into completing the Annihilation Core. Massive shipyards worked without pause, scientists pushed beyond the limits of sanity, creating something that had never been meant to exist, a weapon not just to destroy the void-born but to erase them from the fabric of reality itself. As the first prototype neared completion, the void-born began to move in force. For the first time, they were no longer picking off colonies or fleets at the edge of space, they were coming straight for Terra Prime, the heart of the Dominion. The final battle was coming, and humanity had only one chance to survive. The void-born descended upon Dominion space like a force of nature, unstoppable, incomprehensible, consuming everything in their path. Entire systems were swallowed in darkness. Fleets that once crushed the Zenith now fell in minutes. The final empire faced extinction, and the only hope lay in a weapon that had never been tested, never been proven, never been meant to exist. On Terra Prime, the Annihilation Core was complete, a device unlike anything ever built. It did not fire projectiles, it did not unleash energy, it simply removed matter from existence, collapsing space itself into nothingness. A single activation could erase an entire planet from reality, but the void-born were not a single target, they were everywhere, they were everything. Humanity had one chance, and it had to be perfect. Supreme Chancellor Alexander Voss personally led the final assault aboard the ISS Imperator, the last and greatest warship of the Dominion. The plan was simple but impossible: a direct strike at the heart of the void-born fleet, delivering the Annihilation Core into the center of their forces and triggering a collapse that would either destroy them forever or break the very fabric of the universe itself. The last battle of humanity began. The Dominion's remaining fleets gathered every warship, every soldier, every weapon left in their arsenal and charged into the abyss. The Voidborn responded as they always did, warping reality, tearing ships apart before they even reached firing range. But the Dominion had learned humanity had always adapted, and now they fought with a singular purpose: to hold the line, to give Voss and the Imperator just enough time to reach the center of the storm. The battle was chaos, the void itself screaming as reality bent and shattered around them. The Imperator pushed through shields, failing, hull fracturing, but it did not stop. It could not stop. Deep within the ship, the Annihilation Core was primed, its activation sequence locked. Voss knew there would be no return, no victory parade. The Dominion's final act would be one of defiance, one last strike, to prove that humanity would not go quietly into extinction. As the Imperator reached the heart of the Voidborn horde, the final order was given. The Annihilation Core activated. A light unlike anything seen before erupted across the void. Not an explosion, not destruction, but erasure. The Voidborn screamed a sound that did not belong in this universe as they began to unravel, pulled apart not by force but by the collapse of existence itself. The Imperator was the first to vanish, then the enemy, then space itself. The Dominion's remaining forces watched in awe and horror as the impossible happened. The Voidborn were gone, erased from the universe as if they had never been. The battle was over, but at what cost? The void where the Imperator had been remained a wound in reality itself, a place where nothing could exist. The final empire had survived, but its greatest leader was lost, and the price of victory was something that could never be undone. The galaxy belonged to humanity now, but the scars of the war would never fade. The final empire had risen not just as rulers but as something greater, something terrifying, the only species to ever defy the cycle, to break the reset and to erase the unerasable. The war was over, but humanity's story was far from finished. The galaxy lay in silence. Where once there had been war, the void itself now bore the scar of humanity's defiance. The Annihilation Core had done the impossible, erasing the Voidborn from existence and leaving behind only emptiness where the greatest battle in history had taken place. Terra Prime mourned the loss of Supreme Chancellor Alexander Voss, the man who had led humanity from the brink of destruction to ultimate victory. His sacrifice had ensured the survival of the Dominion, but in his absence a question remained: what came next? The Dominion had conquered the known galaxy, shattered the Zenith, overthrown the old order, and now defeated a force that had existed beyond time itself. There was no enemy left to fight, no empire left to challenge them. Humanity stood alone at the top, and for the first time in history they had nothing to fear. But with that power came something new: uncertainty. The old rulers of the Dominion were gone, lost in war and sacrifice. The military commanders who had survived found themselves not at war but at a crossroads, with no one left to oppose them. The Dominion had become more than an empire, it was now the sole authority in the universe. The outer colonies whispered of rebellion, fearing that humanity had become something unnatural, something that had broken the fundamental laws of existence. The Annihilation Core had not just destroyed the Voidborn, it had left a wound in reality itself, a scar that could never heal. And if humanity could erase an enemy from existence, what would stop them from doing it again? In the shadows, scientists and strategists debated the true nature of what had been done. Had the Voidborn been truly erased, or had they simply been pushed beyond the veil of reality, waiting for the moment to return? And if such a weapon could be created once, what was stopping it from being created again, perhaps even turned against the Dominion itself? A new era was dawning, one where humanity was not just an empire but a force beyond reckoning. The final empire had risen, not as conquerors, not as rulers, but as the architects of reality itself. No species had ever escaped the cycle, no species had ever defied the void. But humanity was not like any species before them. The Dominion's fleets sailed across the stars, no longer seeking war but something greater. The secrets of the Annihilation Core were locked away, hidden from even the highest ranks of power, yet the knowledge of its existence alone ensured that no civilization, no force, no entity would ever dare to challenge humanity again. The final empire had not just survived, it had become something eternal. The cycle was broken, the old laws rewritten, and the galaxy would forever remember the name of the species that had refused to bow, that had refused to be erased, that had looked into the abyss and made it blink. Humanity had conquered the stars, but the greatest question remained. What would they do with eternity?